And so with regards to how the mind works, there are lots of kind of rules of the mind, if you like, or sort of, top tips. But I've kind of condensed this into a few that I think are really sort of crucial. And the first one is that the mind, the human mind, it's got one overriding instinct and role, if you like, and that is to keep us safe. It is always looking to see where danger lies, if there's a danger, what the nature of that danger is, and it's doing its very best to protect us. So it's really in that self-preservation mode all the time. And obviously that comes from ancestral. It's passed down through the generations, and you know, there were many millennia ago, there were real dangers, you know, when we were hunter-gatherers, that we needed to obviously keep safe. But obviously, as times have changed, the things that we now would consider to be fears and dangers are very, very different. And yet our mind, to a certain extent, in lots of regards, is still behaving in that same sort of prehistoric way. And if you team that with the fact that we often have thoughts which are unhelpful, negative, etc., we find ourselves sort of interpreting things in the current age as being fearful, dangerous, and to avoid, when actually, you know, the truth is the complete opposite. So that's the first thing. The second point, or the second key aspect, is that our mind will always act according to what it thinks we want it to do. And in regards to that, it sort of just sees something as an instruction, and it kind of does everything to sort of follow that path, and it doesn't sort of question whether that thought that it's based upon is actually, for example, helpful or unhelpful, whether it's fact or fiction, whether it's good or bad, healthy, unhealthy. So you can think about all different facets with regards to the nature of thoughts that we have, but the mind will just kind of lock on and say, right, it's a thought, and I need to follow that thought, because that's one of the things that I'm supposed to do. The third one is sort of related to that, and it's with regards to the human mind. It's sort of compelled to, and hardwired, if you like, to act in a way that consistently matches our thinking. So not only does it not question a thought that we have, it will just follow something regardless. And it doesn't look at the results, doesn't look at the outcome and think, well, actually, that didn't really get me where I wanted to be. It just does it, and it's consistent, and it will do it again and again and again, without sort of, you know, deviating. So if we think a certain way, perhaps about an event or a belief or an experience, then as humans, we kind of have this map, this mind map, if you like, and the mind will follow that. It will go in that same direction, kind of without questioning it. Number 4 is that our thoughts, all of the thoughts that we have, create a physical and an emotion reaction in our bodies. Now, whether that's, you know, thinking of yourself, that can be a raised heart rate, it can be an increase in temperature, it can be flushing, blushing, it can be teeth grinding, it can be smiling, it can be tears, it can be butterflies in the tummy, it can be a headache, it can be pins and needles, shaking. So all of these things. And it bases that kind of reaction, that physical and emotional reaction, on, again, going back to the thoughts. And the thoughts are kind of created both with the words that we use, the language that we use, the way that we speak about something within that thought, and also the picture that we kind of create. And our thoughts come from lots of different places. They can be ancestral, so they come down in terms of they're part of our genetic code and they get passed on, so actually they're not our thoughts at all. It can come from actual interactions around us, so voices of others, whether we've got an influential voice coming from parents or grandparents or siblings, our boss, work colleagues, friends, partner. So that, again, they might be thoughts kind of shared by others that we kind of take on and absorb, and they can kind of become our own. It can obviously come from a work environment. It can come from social media. It can come from the news. And again, all of these things form our thoughts. And what I want you to think about here now is that not every thought that we have is true. And in fact, a lot of the thoughts that we have are not true. And a thought alone can't do anything until we believe it, until we assign meaning to it. And one of the things I find clients that I see, every thought that they have, they take as real, as gospel. It's like, well, my mind's come up with it, so it must be true. And one of the things that we work on is obviously looking at assessing those thoughts as they come to us. And in another video, I'll talk to you, about strategies about doing that. But yeah, knowing that a thought, if you like, is harmless until we believe it. And we can look at each thought and we can go, okay, do I want to believe that? Or do I not want to believe that? Now, of course, going back to rule 1 about self-preservation, we want to have accurate thinking. We don't want to be somebody who ends up, if you've seen it, on the Darwin list, who, doing something crazy, thoughtless, reckless, that actually is genuinely dangerous, and find ourselves in unsafe situations. We don't want to go too far. We don't want to be too sort of relaxed and lackadaisical. We do want to assess things accurately. So it's, if you like, accurate thinking, but with a positive bias. We want to lean towards the positive and away from the negative, but still obviously make sure that we are accurate. And that will also help support, as I say, the first aspect of the way the mind works, which is that it's always looking to keep us safe. Another aspect of the mind is, if you think in the case of a bit of a kind of battle, if you like, between two sides, we've got logic and we've got emotion. And emotion, whilst we realise that logic is logical, and we'll look at something, as I say, going back to phobia, someone might say, well, I know I've got this phobia of a spider and it's tiny and it's not poisonous and it's so much smaller than me, it's got no power, and I'm massive, and that's the logical conscious mind, if you like. And that logical aspect, whilst it's there and it's shouting and it's got a voice, it is always second fiddle to emotion. So when there is a battle between emotion and logic, emotion always wins. And that is another reason why people get caught in this loop, and they flip between knowing something, saying something, and then go, well, yeah, but I still did this anyway, but I still think this. And then in terms of how things become ingrained and why we find ourselves doing the same thing again and again, or being stuck in the status quo, that's to do with the mind and how it learns. And it learns by repetition, just as a baby learns, when we're very young. All of the things that we start being able to do when we're learning to crawl, to feed ourselves, to talk, to walk, all of these things, we're learning it by repetition. And that's the same as when we get older and we acquire new knowledge, new skills. It's by doing something again and again. So knowing that that's how the mind works, we have to step back and look at the things that we're doing consistently. And, are we doing something consistently that actually is taking us further away from our goal and not towards it? We've got the next one, sort of number 7, if you like. I mean, I've sort of classified it as cozy, but you could use the word familiar. But we really love, and the human mind loves, something that it feels is cozy and familiar. And if we've got a choice between, okay, I know this, and that's just so familiar, that's like a comfort blanket, And this is all that I don't know what that is. That's different. That's something new, familiar and unfamiliar. The mind will always want to gravitate towards the familiar and away from the unfamiliar, but that, unfortunately, is even if they're mixed up. So in fact, the familiar is where we don't want to be. The familiar is the phobia. The familiar is missing out on things. The familiar is having safety mechanisms, avoidance strategies, reducing our circle of friends, all of these things that we don't want. That's our familiar. And actually the unfamiliar, the direction we want to be going in, is just being, a bit more carefree about things, knowing that we have all of these opportunities, relying on our own self-confidence, self-belief, our own decision-making. And yet the two get completely confused, and our mind will still want to take us towards the familiar, the status quo, even if it's not what we want deep down, even if it's taking us away from our goal. And then, sort of based on all that as well, linked to that is number 8, which is, what we focus on, we get more of. And so if we are having all of these thoughts and we are taking all of the negative thoughts that are consistent, and we're believing them, and we're listening to external sources that form these thoughts, or that contribute rather to these thoughts, and they're all consistent, but they're all negative. And we do the same thing again and again and again. And we know that our mind, always acts consistently. And if we're having these emotions, physical sensations that are the same again and again, and we're attributing them to something, this is why the cycle just goes round and round and round. And we find ourselves on this kind of merry-go-round that we just can't get off. So having said all of that, it sounds like, okay, that's great, but what do we do? But there are things that we can do to change that. In my next couple of videos, I'm going to give you some tips about really going back to thoughts, because that's where it all starts. And really looking at our thoughts, looking at our thinking, and looking at how we change that. And so again, just a reminder, just finishing this video on the fact that I really want you to allow in the fact that not all of our thoughts are true. A lot of our thoughts are in fact lies. And so if any of this resonates with you, I'd love to hear from you. So get in touch, drop me a message, click subscribe. My link is in the bio, and I would love to get in touch.